On our 25th anniversary, my wife stood up with a champagne flute in one hand and a microphone in the other, and told a room full of people that she wanted me gone. 25 years is enough, Marla said, her voice cutting through the ballroom like a blade through butter. I want someone younger. I want Tom out of the apartment by tomorrow. The silence that followed had weight. I could hear the air conditioning humming through the vents. Someone's phone chimed. A chair scraped. I sat there at the head table, my hands flat on the white tablecloth, and counted the seconds. 1, 2, 3. The guests were already pulling out their phones. I stood up, walked to her, took the microphone from her hand before she could react. The apartment, I said, looking at the crowd instead of her, is mine. I bought it 6 months before we got married. My name's on the deed. Hers isn't. The murmurs started then. I saw our son Evan look away, his face red. Our daughter Jess had her phone up recording. Marla's smile cracked at the edges. I handed the microphone back to the DJ and walked out through the side door. Behind me, I heard Marla whisper something. I caught only the last part. Tomorrow, you're homeless anyway. I drove home in silence, my hand steady on the wheel. The apartment building rose up against the night sky, 12 stories of brick and concrete. I'd bought the place when I was 26, working double shifts at the newspaper press room, saving every dollar. The mortgage was paid off 3 years ago. It was mine. But something in Marla's voice told me she had a plan. When I parked in the underground garage, the echo of my tires bounced off the concrete pillars. My heart was calm in a way that felt unnatural, the kind of calm that comes before a storm. I took the elevator up to the 12th floor. The doors slid open to the faint smell of lemon polish and old carpet. My footsteps sounded heavier than usual. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The apartment was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums. The city lights flickered through the window, casting fractured reflections on the polished floorboards. On the dining table, someone, Marla probably, had left a pile of unopened envelopes, a vase of wilted lilies, and a single crystal glass with lipstick on the rim. The same shade she'd worn that night, crimson with a metallic sheen. I stood there for a moment, staring at it, before pouring myself a scotch. When I sat down, the cushions still held her shape, the faint smell of her perfume, jasmine and something sharper, maybe bergamot, lingered in the air. I tried to focus on the rhythm of my breathing, in, out. The ice clinked softly in the glass. I told myself that this was temporary, a public tantrum. But the truth was, Marla didn't do anything halfway. I met her 27 years ago, at a gallery opening downtown. She was wearing a black dress and pretending to be bored by everything. I was there because my friend Roger said there'd be free wine. She looked at me like I was out of place, which I was. I was a pressman, my nails stained with ink, wearing a suit that had been ironed too long ago. But she smiled at me anyway, that smile that always meant she'd already decided something. We married fast. Too fast, maybe. Her parents disapproved, but Marla had always loved disapproval. It gave her something to fight against. I gave her a life she could build around, a home, stability, a husband who adored her even when she didn't adore herself. For a long time, that seemed to be enough, until it wasn't. I sat there in the dark, sipping the scotch until the glass was empty. At some point, the clock in the hallway chimed midnight. I checked my phone. No messages from her, none from the kids. The silence was complete. The next morning, I woke to a pounding headache and the faint smell of burnt toast from the apartment next door. The city outside had already started moving. Sirens, horns, the clatter of someone's heels echoing in the stairwell. I showered, shaved, and made coffee like it was any other day. But every movement felt deliberate, rehearsed, like I was pretending to be myself. By 8 o'clock, there was a knock at the door. Not the light tap of a neighbor, but a firm, rhythmic knock. I opened it to find a man in a tailored grey suit holding a stack of papers. Mr. Weller? He asked. Yes. He handed me the envelope. You've been served. The words were clinical, practiced. I stared at the thick paper in my hand. Served what? Divorce and property claim, he said, and turned to leave before I could respond. I stood there for a moment, the hallway echoing with the sound of his retreating footsteps. Then I shut the door and sat down on the couch, tearing the envelope open with my thumb. The document inside was heavy with legal language. Petition, equitable distribution, marital asset. Marla's lawyer had filed for half the apartment, half the savings, half everything. She was claiming that despite my name being the only one on the deed, she had contributed to the maintenance and improvement of the property, and therefore was entitled to a share. I laughed once, a dry sound. She'd been planning this for months, maybe longer. The champagne speech had been the performance. This was the act. I poured another cup of coffee and read through the rest of it. The filing date was the day before our anniversary. I felt a dull pressure in my chest. Not heartbreak, not anger, just an ache that came from realizing you'd been living next to a stranger. By noon, I called my lawyer, Helen Brooks. She'd handled the apartment deed years ago, and I trusted her. When she picked up, her voice was brisk, professional. Tom, I was expecting your call. So you've heard. Marla's lawyer contacted me this morning. She's playing hardball. She always does. She's claiming spousal rights to the apartment, Helen said. We'll fight it, of course. But I'll need all your documentation, purchase records, mortgage statements, title history, everything. I went to the file cabinet in the study and started pulling out folders, receipts from the late 90s, the mortgage payoff letter, the property tax records, everything in neat order. I'd always been meticulous about records. Now that habit was my armor. That afternoon, I met Helen at her office downtown. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and coffee. Her office was bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the river. She looked at the papers I'd brought and nodded. This helps. The deed's clean. She wasn't on it. The mortgage was paid entirely by you. Legally, it's solid. Then she can't take it. She can try, Helen said, and she will, but the law's on your side. Still, I could see something flicker in her eyes, something uncertain. What? I asked. She's alleging that you verbally promised her half ownership, Helen said carefully. It's weak, but if she can produce witnesses... She won't, I said. Helen looked at me for a moment longer, then sighed. All right, let's be ready anyway. When I left her office, the afternoon sun had turned the streets gold. I walked along the waterfront, watching the ferries cut through the river like blades through silk. I tried to think of the last time Marla and I had walked here together. It must have been years ago, maybe before Evan left for college, maybe before the silence settled in between us like dust. The next few days were a blur of paperwork and calls. Jess texted once, "Mum's upset. What did you do?" And then stopped replying. Evan sent a single message. "You okay, Dad?" I didn't answer right away. I didn't know what to say. On Thursday, I came home to find the front door unlocked. My stomach dropped. Inside, Marla was standing in the living room, wearing jeans and a blazer, sunglasses perched on her head like she owned the light. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "Collecting what's mine," she said. She gestured toward the art on the walls, the paintings we'd bought together, the shelves lined with books we both claimed. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." I clenched my jaw. "You can't just walk in here." "My name's still on the mailbox," she said, smirking, "and I still have a key." I watched as she started wrapping the smaller items in bubble wrap she'd brought with her. She moved with precision, almost grace, like she'd rehearsed it. I realized then that this wasn't impulsive. She'd planned every step, every word. "Marla," I said quietly, "you could have talked to me." "We talked for 25 years, she said, not looking up. "You just stopped listening." Her words hit harder than I expected. I wanted to argue. to tell her I'd always listened, that she'd just stopped saying anything worth hearing. But the truth was messier. There were nights when we'd sat in the same room, watching TV, not speaking. Nights when I'd gone to bed early to avoid another argument about nothing. Nights when she'd gone out with her friends from the gym and come home smelling like a stranger's cologne. I let her pack. I didn't help, but I didn't stop her either. By the time she left, the apartment felt lighter and emptier all at once. That night, I opened a bottle of bourbon I'd been saving and sat on the balcony. The city stretched out below, indifferent and alive. Somewhere down there, Marla was probably laughing over wine, retelling the story of the anniversary party, painting herself as the heroine who finally broke free. But as I sat there, a thought began to take shape, an unease that wouldn't fade. Her last words at the party. "Tomorrow you're homeless anyway." She'd said it with certainty, confidence, as if she knew something I didn't. The next morning, I called the building management office. The receptionist put me on hold for a minute, then transferred me to Mr. Graham, the property manager. "Morning, Tom," he said, his tone cautious. "Morning. Listen, I need to ask, has anyone been inquiring about my apartment? Any requests to change ownership or leases?" There was a pause. "You should probably come down and talk in person." When I arrived, Graham was waiting with a folder open on his desk. He looked uncomfortable. "This came in yesterday afternoon," he said, sliding the papers toward me. It was a notice of title dispute, filed by Marla's attorney. Attached was a notarized letter claiming that the apartment had been jointly maintained and financially supported through shared marital funds. They were claiming she had invested her inheritance money into renovations 15 years ago. New kitchen, flooring, appliances. There were receipts attached. Except they weren't hers. They were mine. "Those are my records," I said, pointing at the invoices. "She copied them." Graham nodded. "I figured as much, but the legal department said we have to freeze any change requests until it's settled." I thanked him and left, my pulse hammering. On the street, the noise of traffic felt distant, muffled. The city had turned into background noise, just movement and blur. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face at the party, the glint of satisfaction when she said she wanted me gone. The next morning, I drove out to the storage unit where we kept old boxes from the early years, tax files, photos, forgotten things. I dug through until I found the original receipts from the renovation. Every one of them charged to my card, signed by me. I called Helen. "I have proof," I said. "Good," she said. "Bring them in. And Tom, don't talk to Marla again without me present." I nodded, though she couldn't see it. That weekend, I went for a walk by the river. The air was sharp with the scent of rain. I found myself standing on the same bench where Marla and I had once sat with baby Jess in her stroller, laughing about how we'd name our next one after her grandmother. Back then, everything had felt open, full of promise. Now it all seemed like a story someone else had lived. I stayed there until the sun went down. When I got home, the apartment felt even quieter than before. I poured a drink, turned on some music and tried not to think. But memories crept in anyway. Marla's laughter echoing down the hallway, the sound of Evan's tiny feet against the wood floor. Jess drawing on the walls with crayons, while Marla pretended to scold her but couldn't stop smiling. I wondered when exactly it had all started to rot. A week later, Helen called. "We have a hearing date," she said, 2 weeks from today. "Do we have a shot?" "Better than hers," she said, "but be prepared. She's not going to make it easy." Marla never did. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in the same navy suit I'd worn to Evan's graduation. Helen met me outside the courthouse, her hair pulled back, her briefcase clutched like a shield. Inside, the air smelled faintly of paper and nerves. Marla was already there, sitting with her lawyer, a younger man with slicked back hair and 2 white teeth. She looked impeccable, as always. When our eyes met, she smiled slightly, like she was greeting an old friend she'd already won against. The hearing lasted hours. Her lawyer argued that the apartment was a marital home and that she had made significant emotional and logistical contributions to its upkeep. Helen countered with documents, records, timelines. At one point, Marla took the stand. Her voice trembled just enough to sound believable. She spoke about sacrifices, about how she'd supported me through hard times, about how she'd always believed the apartment was theirs. When it was my turn, I told the truth, that I'd bought it alone, paid every bill myself, that her sacrifices had been vacations, renovations she'd chosen, parties she'd thrown. The judge listened, unreadable. By the end, Helen looked satisfied. "We did well," she whispered as we left. "Now we wait." Waiting was its own kind of torture. Days blurred. I went to work, came home, cooked for one. The walls seemed to close in a little more each night. The apartment felt haunted, not by ghosts, but by the absence of something that used to fill it. One night, around 11, there was another knock on the door. I opened it to find Jess standing there, tears streaking her face. "Mum's moving in with someone," she said. I blinked. "What?" "She told me tonight. Some guy named Caleb. He's 29. She shook her head, wiping her cheeks. "I can't deal with this, Dad. I just needed to see you." I hugged her, awkwardly at first, then tighter. She smelled like lavender shampoo and rain. "I'm sorry, Jess," I whispered. "It's not your fault," she said, but we both knew that wasn't entirely true. 2 days later, the court ruling arrived. Helen called me before I even opened the envelope. "Congratulations," she said. "The apartment's yours, completely." The judge dismissed her claim. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Relief washed over me like a wave that had taken too long to break. But underneath it was something else, something hollow. I hung up, opened the envelope, and read the words myself. Official. Final. The apartment was mine. I walked through each room that night, touching the walls, the furniture, the windows. It was all still there. Everything I'd built, everything she'd tried to take. And yet it felt like standing in the ruins of something sacred. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under the door. Marla's handwriting. Inside, a single line. "You won the building, Tom." But I kept the years. I stared at it for a long time. Then I folded it carefully and slid it into the drawer with the old photos. Life went on. Evan called more often. Jess stopped by on Sundays with coffee. The apartment grew quieter, but in a different way. Peaceful, not empty. Sometimes I caught myself expecting to hear Marla's footsteps, the clink of her bracelets, her laughter echoing down the hall. But all that was gone now, folded into memory. Still, there were moments when I'd wake in the middle of the night and see her silhouette in my mind. Standing in that ballroom, champagne flute glinting in the light, her voice slicing through everything I'd believed solid. 25 years, enough to build a life, enough to dismantle one. And yet, as I stood by the window one morning, watching the sunrise spill over the city, I realized something simple but startling. I wasn't homeless after all. I still had my apartment, my name on the deed, my life, bruised but intact. And somewhere deep beneath the ache, there was something like gratitude. Because in tearing everything apart, Marla had done the one thing I never could. She'd set me free. Before we continue, hit the hype button, subscribe, and like the video to help the channel grow. Tell us which city you are from in the comments. We'd love to get to know our audience better. I spent the next morning at my kitchen table, going through files I kept in a locked drawer. Deeds, leases, bank statements. The apartment was registered under my name alone, purchased February 1987. Marla and I married August 1987, 6 months apart, clean separation of property. But there were other things in those files, things I'd been too tired or too trusting to notice until now. Evan had used my name as a reference with 3 different contractors last year. I found the emails. Tom Hale vouchers for payment. I'd never vouched for anything. He'd racked up $12,000 in charges for his loft renovation. Jess had been invoicing collaboration fees to my credit card for 8 months, $200 here, $500 there. The descriptions were vague. Content partnership, brand alignment consulting. It added up to $4,800. I made a spreadsheet. I'm good at spreadsheets. You don't run a press room for 20 years without learning how to track things. Then I saw the calendar alert on my phone. HOA meeting. Tonight, 7 p.m., special vote on parking deed transfers. I opened the HOA portal and read the agenda. They wanted to convert deeded parking spots into monthly rentals, with the difference going into a building improvement fund. My spot was worth $30,000 on the open market. If the vote passed, I'd get nothing. I checked who'd submitted the proposal. Hale, Marla. Deshawn's gym sat in the basement of an old textile building near the river. The sign outside said Deshawn's Boxing in faded red letters that had long ago surrendered their shine to the weather. The paint peeled like dry skin, and one of the bolts holding the sign to the brick had rusted to a reddish stain. On damp mornings, fog from the river drifted across the parking lot and hung low over the cracked asphalt, curling around the yellowed light of the single street lamp. You could hear the slow pulse of the river behind the building, the steady lap of water against the retaining wall, and sometimes, when the wind was right, the faint clang of a buoy bell drifting from downstream. Inside, the air smelled like sweat and canvas and that chemical tang of old mats that had been scrubbed too many times with bleach. The floor was uneven concrete, patched with dark stains from water and years of spilled sports drinks. A row of heavy bags hung from a steel beam that sagged slightly in the middle. The ropes on the ring were frayed but tight, the kind of thing Deshawn would never let anyone replace because, as he said, they still hold. I'd trained here when I was 18. Back then, the place had felt like a sanctuary, raw, loud, and alive. The radio always played old hip-hop or classic soul, and every time you hit the bag, someone would shout from across the gym to keep your chin down. Deshawn had been 25 then, just back from the Marines, still carrying himself like a man who hadn't yet figured out how to live in a place where people didn't shoot at each other. He'd started the gym to keep kids out of trouble, to give them somewhere to be that wasn't the street. He taught them how to keep their hands up, how to take a hit, how to move through pain instead of flinching from it. Now he was 59, grey in his beard, the lines around his eyes deep as cuts, but his shoulders still filled a doorway. When I walked in, he looked up from wrapping a kid's hands and grinned. "Tom Hale," he said, his voice gravelly but warm. "Thought you forgot about us." "I need to remember some things," I said. He nodded once, finished the kid's wrap, and told him to go work the speed bag. Then he motioned for me to follow him into his office, a closet-sized room tucked behind the lockers. It smelled faintly of motor oil and coffee. A single bare bulb buzzed overhead, and a small fan rattled on the filing cabinet. The desk was metal, scarred with old dents, its surface covered in a neat arrangement of notebooks, a stopwatch, and a photograph of Deshawn in uniform, standing beside 3 other Marines in desert gear. I told him what happened: the anniversary, the apartment, the HOA vote, the credit card charges, the way everything had started to unravel at the edges, quietly at first, then faster, until I couldn't tell what was truth and what was manipulation. He listened without interrupting, his hands folded on the desk, eyes fixed on me like a man listening to a radio transmission that might fade any second. When I finished, he leaned back and exhaled through his nose. "You want to hit someone," he said. "No," I said. "I want to be ready in case someone tries to hit me." "They will," Deshawn said simply. "People who take your money always swing when you ask for it back." He stood, his chair creaking under his weight. "No cops, no courts unless they swing first. You stay legal. You stay calm. You stay ready. He led me back into the main gym, where the heavy bags hung like sleeping giants. The floor beneath them was dark from years of footwork drills. He handed me a pair of wraps and told me to start with the heavy bag. No punching, just pushing my palms into the leather, shifting my weight, learning to move the mass without losing balance. The first few minutes were awkward, my stance too rigid, my breath uneven. But after a while, I found the rhythm again. The give and return of weight, the slight twist of the hips that carried power through the body instead of wasting it in the arms. Good, Deshawn said, circling me like a slow shadow. Power starts in the ground, always has. We worked like that for 10 minutes, maybe more. Then he moved me to clinch work, how to tie up someone's arms, how to use leverage instead of strength, how to break a grip without breaking bones. Control, he said, not damage. You don't need to hurt people to win. You just need them to stop moving. His words hit deeper than the drills. Control, not just of the fight, but of myself, of the anger that had been coiling tighter inside me since everything began falling apart. My phone buzzed on the bench nearby. I grabbed it between rounds, wiping sweat from my hands. A text from Lila, a reporter at the newspaper. She'd covered city politics for years, the kind of journalist who never stopped digging once she smelled something rotten. We'd known each other since high school, back when she'd been the quiet girl who always carried a notebook. Now she had a reputation for exposing corruption, and a few enemies because of it. The message was short. Check your wife's phone bill, same number every night, 11 p.m. Guy named Richard Moss, HOA consultant, also does family law mediation. I stared at the screen. My pulse thudded in my temples. Problem? Deshawn asked. Just found one, I said. He didn't press. He never did. He just watched me for a moment, then nodded toward the bag. Hit it, not hard, just enough to remember you can. So I did. Each strike was measured, deliberate, a conversation between body and anger. The bag swayed, groaned, swung back into my palms. My breath steadied. The noise of the gym faded until it was just the sound of leather meeting skin and the soft hiss of air leaving my lungs. When we finished, Deshawn tossed me a towel. Don't do anything stupid tonight, he said. I'll try, I said. Trying's for people who don't plan ahead. You plan. Outside, the sun was sinking, the river catching the last light like a strip of metal. I sat in my car for a long time before turning the key. Lila's message glowed on the screen again, the name Richard Moss burning into my thoughts. I remembered the HOA meetings, long, dull affairs in the community centre where everyone argued about landscaping and parking spaces. My wife, Erin, had been on the board, sitting beside Moss a few times, their heads bent together over paperwork. I'd thought nothing of it then. I thought nothing of a lot of things. At home, the house was quiet. Erin's car wasn't in the driveway. I poured a glass of water, set my phone on the counter, and stared at it. I could have called her, could have asked where she was, but something stopped me, the same instinct that told you to duck before a punch lands. Instead, I pulled up the phone bill. The number was there, night after night, always at 11 cow. Sometimes 30 minutes, sometimes an hour. Always him. I copied the number, ran a quick search. Richard Moss, consultant, mediator, resident of Brookfield Heights. Married once, divorced. His website showed him smiling beside a fountain, wearing the kind of smile you didn't trust, too symmetrical, too polished. He had the kind of face that got people to sign things they didn't read. I felt something heavy settle in my chest, not anger yet, but the dense calm before it. When Erin came home, she found me sitting in the dark living room. She paused in the doorway, surprised. Tom, why are you sitting like that? Just thinking, I said. She smiled carefully, the way someone does when they know a storm is close. About what? About Richard Moss. Her breath hitched just enough for me to notice. He's the HOA consultant, you know that. I know he calls you every night at 11. Silence. The clock ticked on the wall, loud as a hammer. Finally, she said, "It's not what you think." "Then what is it?" She opened her mouth, closed it again. "He's helping me with something. Legal advice." "At 11 at night?" She looked away. "You don't understand how complicated—" "I understand enough." I stood up, not fast, not threatening, just enough to remind both of us that I was done sitting. "I'm going to bed," I said. She didn't follow. I barely slept. I dreamed of the gym, of Deshawn's voice echoing, control, not damage, and of the river rolling dark beneath the bridge near the old textile mill. The next morning, I found Lila waiting outside my office. Her notebook was open, pen tapping the page. "You saw the message," she said. "I saw it. You going to talk to him?" "I might." "Be careful. He's connected. Half the council's hired him at one point or another. He's got a reputation for making problems disappear." "I'm not looking for a problem," I said. She gave me a look that said she didn't believe me. "You always were terrible at lying, Tom." She handed me a manila envelope. "That's everything I could pull. Emails, business records, property transfers. You'll want to see page 5. When I got home, I opened it on the kitchen table. Page 5 was a joint ownership form, Richard Moss and Erin Hale listed together under primary stakeholders. The property, an apartment downtown. The same one where the credit card charges had been showing up. Deshawn's voice came back again. "People who take your money always swing when you ask for it back." That night I went back to the gym. It was nearly empty, except for one kid jumping rope in the corner. Deshawn was alone in the ring, sitting on a stool, wrapping his wrists. "You look worse," he said. "Feels worse," I said. He nodded. "Then you're learning something." We worked until my arms shook, not to get stronger, but to remember the rhythm of survival. The breath between hits, the pause before reacting. Every movement a rehearsal for calm. When I left, the night was cold. The river was higher than before, pushing against the walls, dark and relentless. I stood there a long time, thinking about everything that had led me back here, every quiet compromise, every look away, every choice to keep the peace. And how peace, when built on lies, was just another kind of war. I didn't know yet what I would do about Erin, or about Moss, or about the life that had been slowly rewritten without my consent. But I knew this. I would stay legal. I would stay calm. I would stay ready. And for the first time in months, I knew exactly what that meant. I didn't need surveillance. I needed records. Phone bills are legal documents. You pay for them. You own them. I was still on the family plan. I logged into the account online and pulled 3 months of statements. Richard Moss. Same number. Every night at 11, calls lasting 20 to 40 minutes. I cross-referenced the number with the HOA directory. He was listed as a compliance consultant, hired 4 months ago to review building security. At the HOA meeting, I sat in the back row. 30 people in a basement conference room. Marla sat near the front, talking to 2 other board members. Richard Moss stood beside the projector, a slim man in a grey suit, mid-40s, with the kind of smile that made you check your wallet. He presented the parking proposal. Smooth voice. PowerPoint slides with charts showing revenue optimization and equitable access. He never said the words, "taking your property," but that's what it meant. I raised my hand during the Q&A. "How much is the consultant being paid?" I asked. Moss glanced at Marla. "That's a personnel matter." "Public funds," I said. "Public record." The board president, a retired teacher named Barbara, checked her notes. $2,500 a month, 6-month contract. "And does the consultant have any financial interest in the building improvement fund?" I asked. Silence. "Just asking," I said, "since the proposal benefits the fund and the consultant's on contract." Barbara frowned. "We'll table this for further review." Marla's face went tight. Moss packed up his laptop without looking at me. I left before the meeting ended. On my way out, I checked my phone. Another text. This one from Evan. Dad, we need to talk. Rehearsal dinner is next week. Nadia wants to make sure everything's smooth. Nadia, Evan's fiancée. I'd met her twice. She smiled a lot and talked about design. I opened the attachment. It was a contract for a rehearsal dinner at the Bridgepoint Grand Hotel. $13,000. My credit card number at the bottom. I hadn't signed it. I found Evan at the newspaper loading dock. He worked in marketing, 3 blocks away, but he'd started using our freight entrance as a shortcut to avoid downtown traffic. I knew his schedule. Tuesday and Thursday, 5:15 p.m., he'd cut through our back lot. It had become one of those small, predictable rituals, his steps echoing against the concrete, the faint sound of car horns muffled by rain, the glow of his phone lighting up his face as he scrolled through messages. I'd watched it happen for weeks, each time standing a little farther back, just to make sure the pattern held. It did. He was reliable that way, in his movements, if not in his choices. I waited by the loading bay, leaning against a stack of pallets that smelled faintly of wet pine. The bay doors were open, and the air carried a damp chill that crept beneath my collar. Rain misted the air in that fine, floating way that barely seemed to fall at all. Forklifts beeped in the distance, the sound flat and mechanical, bouncing off the steel walls. Somewhere inside the warehouse, someone shouted directions, and a motor coughed to life. I kept my eyes on the alley opening where the streetlights flickered orange in the drizzle. Evan walked in with his phone out, texting, his tie loosened, his hair damp at the edges. He didn't see me until I stepped into his path. The sudden awareness crossed his face like a glitch in a video, eyes widening, posture straightening, the flicker of guilt he tried to bury under a forced smile. "Hey, Dad," he said, too quick, too light. "What's up?" "The rehearsal dinner," I said, keeping my voice even. His face went blank, a practiced neutrality. "What about it?" "I didn't sign for it." "Nadia said you told her it was fine." "Nadia lied." He blinked, his expression faltering just enough to reveal the pulse of panic beneath it. He took a half step back, adjusting his jacket like it might shield him. "Dad, come on, it's my wedding. Don't make this weird." "Show me the paperwork," I said. "I don't have it on me." "Yes, you do. Inside pocket, left side. I can see the corner." His hand moved to his jacket. Instinct, not strategy. Then he bolted. He ran toward the back of the dock, his shoes splashing through shallow puddles, echoing against the corrugated walls. He moved faster than I expected, but panic isn't endurance. Panic burns quick. He cut past a parked forklift, through the narrow lane between the newsprint storage racks, the air smelling of ink and machine oil. I followed, not fast, but steady. I didn't need to be fast. I knew the space better than he did. The lane ended at a chain-link fence topped with barbed wire. No exit. Evan stopped at the fence, his breath sharp and uneven. He turned, eyes darting, calculating options that weren't there. He pulled the envelope from his jacket, his hand shaking. "This is insane," he said, voice cracking between anger and fear. I held out my hand. The rain had deepened, the drops heavier now, streaking the metal fence behind him. He didn't move. I stepped closer, slow and deliberate. He tried to duck past me, but I'd seen that coming. I used Deshaun's clinch, arms locked, elbows tight, caught his arms and pinned them against his sides. He struggled, twisting, but I held on. No punches, no pain, just weight and patience, the kind that wears a man down without breaking him. "Drop it," I said. He did. The envelope hit the wet concrete with a soft slap. I let him go. He stumbled back, hitting the fence hard enough to make it rattle. His breath came fast and shallow. I picked up the envelope, brushed off the rain, and opened it. Inside, the venue contract, a seating chart drawn with careful precision, a list of AV cues, and a printout of a text thread. The paper smelled faintly of cologne and printer toner. The texts were between Nadia and someone saved as RM. Richard Moss. I'd heard that name before. Her boss, maybe, or something more. The words were clean and efficient, no wasted sentences. We'll have the apartment key by the rehearsal. He won't fight, he's too tired. Attached, a photo of my apartment key, sitting on my kitchen counter. My counter, the chipped tile by the sink, the faint scratch on the key's edge from where I'd dropped it on the pavement years ago. Details no one would notice unless they'd been there. I looked at Evan. You gave her a copy. Dad. His voice broke. She needed it, for emergencies. There's no emergency, I said. There's just you and her and your mother trying to take my home. He flinched at that. Maybe at the word mother. Maybe at the truth in it. His jaw tightened. You're overreacting. I put the envelope in my jacket and turned away. The rain had turned cold enough to sting. Behind me, Evan shouted something, my name, maybe, or another plea, but I didn't stop. The sound of his voice fell away, lost in the echo of machinery and rain. As I walked through the loading bay, the fluorescent lights flickered overhead. A forklift idled near the far wall, its driver pretending not to notice. I passed him, climbed the stairs to the main corridor, and paused at the glass doors. Outside, the street was a river of headlights. The city moved on, indifferent, washing over whatever remained of us. I walked the 3 blocks home, my hands in my pockets, feeling the edge of the envelope against my fingers. The street smelled of ozone and exhaust. My shoes soaked through before I reached the intersection at 3rd. I stopped there, waiting for the light, watching the reflections of traffic signals ripple across the puddles. Every sound felt amplified, the distant wail of a siren, the hum of a passing bus, the hollow click of a crosswalk signal counting down to 0. Somewhere behind those sounds, I thought I heard Evan again, calling out, but it was only the wind dragging through the alleys. When I reached my building, the lobby lights were dim, one bulb flickering in the corner near the mailboxes. The elevator doors were open, waiting. I stepped inside, pressed the button for the 5th floor, and watched my reflection in the brushed metal walls. My eyes looked older than I remembered. My hands trembled slightly, not from anger, but from the slow realization that something had ended, something invisible but enormous. The hallway outside my apartment smelled faintly of dust and paint. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The place felt colder than usual. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. I turned on the kitchen light. The counter was clean, except for the faint ring where a mug had sat that morning. The drawer where I kept the spare keys was open an inch, not enough to be obvious, just enough to say someone had been here. I stood there a long time, the envelope still in my hand. The rain tapped against the window. I pulled out the papers again and laid them flat on the table. The venue contract was for Saturday, non-refundable deposit, catering for 120, audiovisual setup per specifications attached. My name was missing from the signature line, so was my approval code. Instead, a digital signature for E-Car, Evan, and Nadia's initials in the margin. They'd gone around me completely. The seating chart was meticulous. Nadia's parents near the front, Evan's co-workers grouped together, my name nowhere, not even a token seat near the back. I traced my finger along the rows until I reached a blank space labeled miscellaneous relatives. That was where they'd meant to put me, I guessed. Somewhere invisible near the exit. I turned to the printout again. More text followed. RM. Once the papers are signed, he can't contest. He won't even see it coming. Nadia. He'll think it's about the dinner. He always thinks small. Then another message. Evan's handling it. We'll have access to everything by Sunday. Access. Not permission. Access. The word rang like metal in my head. I walked to the window. Across the street, the neon sign from the laundromat buzzed and flickered. A couple waited under an awning, their umbrella sagging under the rain. I wondered if they looked like we once had, years ago, before Evan was old enough to know what silence between his parents meant. I wondered if they thought they were safe. I made coffee, though I didn't need it. The sound of the percolator was grounding, the kitchen filled with the smell of burnt beans and metal. I sat down, the cup steaming between my hands, and read the messages again. Each time, they made a little more sense and a little less pain. Nadia had planned this. She'd used Evan to do it cleanly, legally, in daylight. Richard Moss, whoever he was, had made it possible. I thought about calling Evan. Then I thought better of it. There was nothing left to say that wouldn't push him farther away. He'd chosen his side, even if he didn't understand what that meant yet. Maybe one day he would. Maybe one day he'd look back and realize the cost. At midnight, I put the papers back in the envelope and slid it into the drawer beside my passport. I locked the drawer. Then I turned off the lights and sat in the dark for a long time, listening to the building settle around me. The pipes ticking, the elevator cables humming faintly through the walls, the whisper of rain easing into drizzle. Somewhere in that sound was a kind of peace. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the quiet certainty that I hadn't imagined it, that the betrayal was real, that my anger had a shape and a name. I closed my eyes and pictured Evan at the fence again, breathing hard, holding that envelope like it was proof of something good. I wondered what he saw when he looked at me. A threat, a relic, or just a man who refused to disappear quietly. When I finally lay down, dawn was still hours away. The city outside was washed pale by the rain. I could hear the low rumble of the first delivery trucks heading back to the dock. In a few hours, the same routine would repeat, the same footsteps, the same shortcuts. Maybe Evan would come through again, maybe not. Either way, I'd be ready, because whatever they thought they'd taken from me, it wasn't gone yet. Not until I said so. The Bridgepoint Grand Hotel sat on Water Street, a 7-story building with a ballroom on the second floor. I went in through the front, asked for the events manager, and waited in the lobby. 10 minutes later, a woman in a grey suit came down. Her name tag said, Lisa Kern. "Mr. Hale," she said, "you're Evan's father." "I'm the one paying," I said. "I need to add a rider to the contract." "What kind of rider?" "Safety provision. I'm responsible for AV cutoffs and crowd management during the event. If there's a disturbance, I have authority to shut down microphones and control exits." She frowned. "That's unusual." "I work in a press room," I said. "Union safety officer for 12 years. I know emergency protocols. I'm paying $13,000. I want the room to be safe." She looked at her tablet. "I'll have to run this by legal." "Please do. Also, I'd like a copy of all vendor contracts tied to my credit card." "Why?" "Because they're mine," I said. She nodded slowly. "I'll send them over." I left the hotel and checked my phone. A text from Jess. "Mom says you need to hand over your apartment keys at the rehearsal. It's easier for everyone." I didn't reply. Lila met me at a diner near the river. She ordered coffee. I ordered nothing. She slid a folder across the table. "Richard Moss," she said. "Family law mediator. Also runs a consulting LLC called Bridgepoint Community Solutions. Registered 8 months ago. Clients include 3 HOAs and 2 property management firms." I opened the folder. Inside were printouts from the State Business Registry. Articles of incorporation. Moss was listed as sole owner. No other names. "He's not stealing," Lila said. "He's just making sure he's on every side of every transaction. Your wife hires him as a mediator. He suggests the HOA needs a consultant. He gets both contracts. He pushes your wife to pressure you out of the apartment so the property can be liquidated. He takes a cut as the mediator and a cut as the HOA consultant when the parking revenue plan goes through." "That's legal?" I asked. "It's slimy," she said. "But unless he's committing fraud or breaching fiduciary duty, it's just unethical." I closed the folder. "What about conflict of interest?" HOA bylaws usually require disclosure. If he didn't disclose his relationship with a board member, that's a violation. He didn't, I said. Lila smiled. Then you file a complaint, citing safety, stairwell obstructions, parking violations, whatever you can document. The board has to investigate. That pauses the vote. I stood up. Thanks. Tom, she said, be careful. Guys like Moss don't lose quietly. Neither do I said. That night, I changed the locks on my apartment. Then I filed an HOA complaint, attaching photos of blocked stairwells, outdated fire extinguishers, and a vendor truck parked in the emergency lane. I cited Section 12 of the bylaws. Board members must disclose financial relationships that present conflicts of interest. I hit send at midnight. The next morning, Deshawn texted me. Moss left your wife's car at dawn. I saw him. I stared at the message. Then I went back to the gym. Deshawn had me work the ring for an hour. Not sparring, just movement. How to slip a punch without backing up. How to break someone's grip by rotating your wrist instead of pulling. How to use your body weight to stop momentum without throwing a punch. You're going to want to hit someone, he said. Don't. I know. No, you don't, because when someone takes everything from you, hitting them feels like justice. But it's not. It's just giving them an excuse to call the cops. I nodded. Control, he said again. You control the room. You control the narrative. You control yourself. They get nothing. After the session, I sat in his office and wrote down one-liners, things I could say to stay calm, to keep my voice level, to redirect anger into clarity. You forgot the apartment's mine. I don't raise my voice. I raise the house lights. Keys on the table. I kept the right set. Stupid, maybe, but they helped. That night, I went to the rehearsal dinner. I wasn't invited, but I paid for it, so I went. The room was full of Evan's friends, Nadia's family, and a few people I didn't recognize. Marla sat at the head table, laughing. Richard Moss stood near the bar, talking to Nadia's mother. Evan stood up to give a toast. He talked about new beginnings, about building a life, about leaving behind obsolete ideas. He didn't look at me. I left before dessert. 2 days before the wedding, I went back to the hotel to check on the AV setup. Lisa Kern met me in the ballroom and walked me through the lighting board, the microphone switches, and the emergency exits. Everything was in order. As I was leaving, a man stopped me in the stairwell. I didn't know him. He was big, mid-30s, wearing a groomsman's suit. You're Tom? He asked. I am. Evan says you have his fiancé's apartment key. I have my apartment key, I said. Same thing. Not even close. He stepped in front of me, blocking the stairs. Hand it over. No. He shoved me. I used the wall to brace and twisted sideways, letting his weight carry him forward. He stumbled. I caught his wrist, pulled him into a clinch, and used my shoulder to pin his arm against the doorframe. He couldn't swing, couldn't pull away. Let go, he said, his voice tight. When you stop, I said. Hotel security arrived 30 seconds later. A man in a black suit with a radio. He looked at us, then at me. Problem? He asked. He attacked me, the groomsman said. The security guard looked at me. Sir? He shoved me, I said. I restrained him. No punches. Check the cameras. The guard radioed someone. 2 minutes later, another guard arrived with a tablet. They reviewed the stairwell footage. The first guard nodded. He shoved you, he said to me. You defended yourself. You want to file a report? No, I said. Just want to leave. He was drunk, the groomsman said, desperate. The guard pulled a breathalyzer from his belt. Blow. I did. 0. The guards escorted the groomsman out. I walked to my truck and checked my phone. A text from Marla. HOA vote moved to Saturday. Same time as the wedding. Convenient for you. I called Deshawn. They're trying to force me to choose, I said. Wedding or the vote. You don't choose, Deshawn said. You handle both. How? We deliver the complaint evidence in person. I'll go. You stay at the wedding, but we make sure the board knows there's a problem before they vote. Will that work? It'll pause them, he said. That's all you need. Deshawn printed the complaint file and hand-delivered it to Barbara's condo Friday night. He texted me a photo of her signature on the receipt log. Saturday morning, the board sent an email. Special vote postponed pending conflict of interest review, meeting rescheduled for next month. Marla called me 6 times. I didn't answer, but I saved the voicemail. She didn't know I could hear her talking to someone else in the background. He's blocking everything. We need to move faster. The wedding. Get the keys at the wedding. Moss's voice, faint but clear. Nadia knows what to do. I played it back twice. Then I called the one person who could help. Her name was Angela Moss. She worked at Bridgepoint General, night shift in the ER. I didn't know her, but Deshawn did. His niece worked the same floor. Deshawn set up the meeting at a coffee shop near the hospital. Angela showed up in scrubs, her hair tied back, exhaustion etched into her face. You're Tom Hale, she said. I am. Deshawn said you have a Richard Moss problem. I do. You too? She opened her bag and pulled out a folder. My husband, your wife's consultant, he's been running side deals for 18 months. Mediation contracts, HOA gigs. He tells me it's temporary, but he's never home, never honest. I filed a complaint with the family court about his abuse of mediation privilege. It's been stonewalled. I looked at the folder. Inside were emails, billing records, and a timeline. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Because Deshawn said you're going to burn it all down, she said, and I want to watch. I'm not burning anything, I said. I'm just making sure the truth comes out. Same thing, she said. I told her the plan, the wedding, the keys, the public moment. She listened, her face hard. I'll be there, she said, when you need me. Friday night, I went to the hotel ballroom and marked a line across the back corridor with blue painter's tape. On one side, I wrote vendor access. On the other, family only. Lisa Kern watched from the doorway. What's this? Safety boundary, I said. My contract rider. I'm responsible for crowd control. This keeps the caterers and florists from getting tangled up with guests during service. You're serious about this, she said. $13,000 serious, I said. She nodded. Security reports to you if there's an incident. Per the rider. Correct. I finished the line and stepped back. It looked absurd, a strip of blue tape across polished wood, but it was mine. That night, Marla texted Nadia. I only knew because Lila had a source inside the family text chain. Someone's aunt who didn't like Moss. Take his keys at the mic, smile, make it look like a gift. I read it 3 times, then I went to bed. Wedding morning started with chaos. A downtown parade blocked the main bridge into the hotel district. Fire trucks, marching bands, a union rally for the old mill workers. The vendor trucks couldn't get through. I was already at the hotel. I saw the trucks stacking up on River Road and walked out with a handful of traffic cones and a coil of rope from the press room loading dock. I'd signed them out legally, documented on an equipment log. Deshawn met me at the bridge approach. Together, we redirected the trucks down the side streets, using the cones and rope to mark a temporary lane. Drivers honked. A limo tried to bully through. Deshawn stepped in front of it, calm, arms folded. The driver backed off. No violence, no shouting, just presence. The trucks got through. The flowers arrived. The caterers set up. By noon, the ballroom was ready, but I saw Richard Moss in the hallway, talking to the officiant. Close, whispering. The officiant nodded. I didn't interrupt. I just watched. I wasn't supposed to be near the bridal suite, but I delivered a box of programs to the hallway outside, and the door was open. I heard Jess talking. Mum says after the reception we post the eviction story. Dad refused to support the family, so we had to take action. Gets ahead of any backlash. Nadia's mother laughed. I'll do a live stream. Poor us, dealing with a stubborn old man. I set the box down and walked away. In the hallway, I pulled out my phone and made one call. It's time, I said. Angela's voice came through, tired but steady. I'll be there. The wedding ceremony was short, 20 minutes. Evan and Nadia stood under an arch covered in white roses. The officiant talked about new beginnings and fresh starts. Every word felt aimed at me. I sat in the back row. I didn't cry, didn't smile, just watched. When they kissed, the room applauded. I stayed seated. The projection screen behind the arch flickered on for a photo slideshow. I'd programmed it myself earlier, using the AV controls Lisa had given me access to. It would stay dark until I triggered it. After the ceremony, we moved to the reception. The ballroom filled with 200 people. Lights dimmed. Music started. Evan and Nadia took the floor for their first dance. I stood near the AV booth, my hand on the microphone cutoff switch under the lectern. Dinner ended at 8. The toasts began. Evan's best man went first, then Nadia's maid of honor, then Nadia herself holding the microphone. She thanked everyone, thanked her parents, thanked Evan. Then she turned to me. And Tom, she said, her voice sweet, we know this has been hard for you. Change is hard. So we're asking you, in front of everyone who loves us, to do the right thing. She walked over to my table, held out her hand. Give me your apartment keys. The room went silent. No, I said. Her smile cracked. Tom, don't make this difficult. The apartment's mine, I said. She slapped me. Gasps rippled through the room. Phones came up. I didn't move, just looked at her. Then I reached under the lectern and pressed the AV cutoff. The music stopped. Lights dimmed to work lights only. No theatrics, just clarity. I stood up and walked to the AV booth, pressed the intercom button that connected to the lobby security desk. Send her in, I said. The ballroom doors opened. Angela Moss walked in, still in scrubs, her face exhausted. Behind her, Deshawn and a man in a Union safety vest. The room broke. People gasped. Some cried. Because Angela's face told a story even before she spoke. She walked to the center of the room and looked at Richard Moss. Tell them, she said, her voice shaking. Tell them what you've been doing. Moss went pale. He tried to step back. Deshawn blocked him. You told me the side work was temporary, Angela said. You told me the mediation contracts were just helping people. But you've been manipulating them. You manipulated this family. You told Marla to pressure Tom. You told Nadia to take his home. You engineered all of this so you could take a cut from the HOA vote and the marital property split. She held up a folder. I filed a complaint 6 months ago about your abuse of mediation privilege. It got buried, but it's all here. Emails, contracts, your own notes. The room was silent. I walked to the microphone and turned it back on. I didn't yell. I didn't rant. I just asked questions. Marla, I said, did you hire Richard Moss as a family mediator 4 months ago? She didn't answer. Evan, I said, did you use my credit card to pay for this venue without my permission? He looked at the floor. Nadia, I said, did Richard Moss tell you to demand my apartment keys tonight? Her mother tried to stand. Deshawn stepped forward. She sat back down. I triggered the projector. The screen behind the head table lit up. Phone logs, not the full numbers, just the call times and durations. 11 p.m., every night, 40 minutes, Marla and Moss. Then, the HOA Conflict of Interest Bylaw, Section 12, highlighted. Then, the rehearsal dinner contract. My credit card number, my forged signature. A side-by-side comparison with my real signature from the apartment deed. Then, a screenshot of the text thread between Nadia and RM. The one about the apartment key. I didn't editorialize. I just let the images sit. Lisa Kern, the venue manager, stepped into the light. Mr. Hale has legal authority over AV and safety per his contract rider. This presentation falls within that scope. Moss tried to speak. This is slander. It's evidence, I said. Public records, phone bills, contracts, your own texts. Angela stepped forward. And my complaint, which names you, which the court will finally see. Marla stood up. Tom, please. I'm done, I said. Evan lunged at me. I saw it coming. I stepped into him, caught his arm, used his momentum to twist him down. Not a throw, just a controlled drop. He hit the floor, and I pinned his wrist against the table edge. No pain, just control. Security moved in. I let go. Evan scrambled back. I walked to the AV booth and made 3 calls. First, the florist. Cancel the champagne tower and the floral arch extension. I'm the card holder. I'm revoking authorization. Second, the valet. Bring my truck around. Also, check the registration on the black SUV in slot 42. I co-signed the loan. I'm repossessing it. Third, Barbara, the HOA president. Richard Moss has a conflict of interest. Angela Moss is filing a formal complaint with the state. Your vote is void. I hung up. Marla stood in the center of the room, surrounded by guests who weren't sure if they should leave or stay. Jess was crying. Evan was on the floor, breathing hard. I walked to the head table and picked up a small leather bag. Inside, the title to the SUV. My tools that Evan had borrowed and never returned. A copy of the apartment deed. I held up the deed. This is mine. It was mine before we married. It's mine now. You don't get it. You don't get my parking spot. You don't get anything I didn't agree to give. Nadia's mother tried to start a chant. Let it go, Tom. Let it go. Richard Moss tried to leave. Deshawn blocked the door. Stay, he said. You're part of this. The union safety officer stepped forward and handed me a clipboard. Sign here. Confirms no one was physically harmed beyond a mutual restraint. I signed. Evan signed, his hand shaking. Then the fire alarm went off. Someone pulled the alarm. I don't know who. Maybe panic. Maybe malice. The room erupted. People ran for the exits. Chairs overturned. Someone screamed. The alarm was deafening. Stop! I shouted into the microphone. It's a false alarm. Walk to the exits. Don't run. Security moved through the crowd, guiding people. I saw an elderly woman stumble. I caught her arm, steadied her, walked her to the side door. Evan tried to shove past me. I caught his arm and pinned it to the table. Not hard, just enough to stop him. You're not running, I said. Let go. Not until everyone's safe. Deshawn and the safety officer worked the crowd, keeping people calm. It took 10 minutes, but the room emptied without injury. When the last guest was out, I released Evan. He stumbled back, breathing hard. I walked to the head table and placed my old apartment key on the white tablecloth. Then I pulled a new key from my pocket and set it beside the old one. This is the old key, I said. To locks you'll never open, and this is the new key. To a home you'll never enter. I looked at Marla. I'm filing for divorce. Clean split. You get what you brought in. I keep what I earned. I looked at Evan. You owe me $12,000 for the contractors. I want it in 6 months, or I file a claim. I looked at Jess. You owe me $4,800 for the collaboration fees. Same terms. I looked at Nadia. You owe me an apology. I don't expect to get it. Then I turned to Richard Moss. The union safety officer was standing beside him. Lisa Kern, the venue manager, stood on his other side. Mr. Moss, Lisa said, hotel policy prohibits vendors from engaging in conflicts of interest with event clients. You're banned from this property. Angela stepped forward. And I'm filing my complaint with the court on Monday, with witnesses. Moss didn't speak. He just walked out, flanked by security. I picked up the new key and put it in my pocket, left the old one on the table. Then I turned and walked out through the vendor corridor. the blue tape line still visible on the floor. Outside, the sun was setting. The air smelled like rain. I got in my truck and drove home. The divorce took 4 months. Clean split. Marla got the furniture. I kept the apartment. Evan paid me back in 8 months, not 6. Jess paid in 12. With interest she insisted on adding. Nadia sent a card 6 months later. It said, "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. Angela's complaint went through. Richard Moss lost his mediation license. Last I heard, he moved to another state. The HOA dropped the parking proposal. Barbara stepped down as president. I didn't run for the board. I still train at Deshawn's gym 3 times a week. I still work at the press room. I still live in my apartment, the one I bought when I was 26. Some nights, I sit at the kitchen table and look at the new key. It's just a piece of brass. But it means I stayed. I just ended it where it needed to end, with the keys on the table. And I kept the right set.